Welcome to another episode of Scene It First, sponsored by Fictionary, your story editing software. In this series, we sit down with award-winning best-selling authors to discuss first scenes, explore writing craft, and celebrate the stories that thrill and inspire us all. I'm James Gallagher, a copy editor and Fictionary certified story coach, and tonight we are very excited to welcome someone I have an immense amount of respect for, one of my personal editing heroes, and a wonderful writer as well, Carol Fisher Saller. For everyone here, for the next half hour, we will talk to Carol about writing, about editing, about children's fiction, and we'll look at the first scene of her book, Maddie's Ghost in Fictionary. We'll have a few minutes for questions at the end of the session, but at any time, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat, and we will be happy to get to them. Carol Saller lives in Chicago, Illinois. Honors for her children's books include Starred Reviews, Backstreet Best, Kirkus Best, and NCSS CBC Notables. Carol, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Thank you, James. I'm fine. It's great to be here. I'm curious about Fictionary. I've looked at it a little bit, and it's always fun to talk about books and writing.
Yeah, and we'll get a little later in the episode, we'll get a good close look at Fictionary for the first scene with Maddie's Ghost. And this is a good chance do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the books you have out and what you're working on?
Sure. Well, the book that introduced you and me was the Subversive Copy Editor, and that's my most successful book. It's adult nonfiction, kind of a self-help book for editors and writers. That's not about how to copy edit. It's about how to work together, how to collaborate on a book for the benefit of the reader. And so it's about getting over your ego issues and your stickler issues and how to be ready to break the rules in order to make the best possible reader experience. So that's the Subversive Copy Editor, and from that came the blog, which now that I'm retired from editing, my focus is on writing and giving advice to writers. So I've retooled, and my long-running blog, which was called the Subversive Copy Editor, has been renamed Writer Editor Helper, and I'm not posting there anymore, but I have a newsletter that's about once a month, and it's for people who are mainly interested in creative writing. My focus is children's books, but I think creating creative writing of all kinds and self-publishing, which is something else that I've moved into because my previous children's books were traditionally published, and now I'm publishing my own. So then that's the segue to children's books. For the last decades, I have occasionally published a children's book, and a lot of them are out of print now, but my most recent one, just this year, I published Maddie's Ghost, middle grade fiction, and the one before that was young adult fiction, historical fiction, Eddie's War. I would say that I've probably have settled now into middle grade. I've written for all ages, but middle grade seems to be high middle grade. In fact, Eddie's War is kind of low YA, high middle grade, and now Maddie's Ghost is kind of inching toward YA, but it's an 11, 12-year-old, 11s and 12-year-olds, so it's definitely middle grade. Okay, enough rambling.
Well, and I will say that the Subversive Copy Editor is a book that I've loved for a long time, and it's a book that I think every editor should have on their bookshelf, and it's great for writers too. And one of the nicest things about that is in the Fictionary community, the big thing that you always hear is people talk about kindness, about being kind, and the Subversive Copy Editor is all about a copy editor not being the wagging your finger at the author, correcting the author, but bringing out the author's voice and helping the author and being a real supporter of the author. So I love that. It's a beautiful philosophy. And I was wondering, so as you moved from the Subversive Copy Editor to Writer Editor Helper, How has how has that been to have that editing experience on the other side as a writer? How's that? How have those two things played off against each other? And as you've worked with
Yeah.
editors,
Yeah, I just think it's a huge privilege to be edited. Even whether it's a professional edit or more of a beta read or any kind of feedback at all, I always use like 98% of it. Even if I don't like, if I disagree with what was flagged, I think that's what that writer thought. That's what that reader thought. Other readers are going to think that. So I deal with it. Um, and But I also think that because of my editing experience, I do a huge amount of self-editing, and that my manuscripts uh, have. I mean, there's always plenty for someone else to catch, but I think that the gross stuff is pretty well in hand. That I don't have a lot of typos, and I don't have a lot of continuity issues and stuff like that. But they are there, and there are some wacky things that people have found. That in one book I had two characters with the same name. I mean, they were minor throwaway characters, but one near the beginning of the book and one near the end. And I had a style sheet, but somehow ended up with two characters with the same name and stuff like that. It's just really great always to have someone looking over your work. So I love it.
yeah, and even for the very best editors, which you certainly are, it's a a good insight for authors is that you're just too close for the work. So having that other eyes, and I think one of the things you said in Subversive Copy Editor was that that even if you take any two equally accomplished, experienced editors, they're always going to edit a book in slightly different ways, and that's an important thing to keep in mind too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even just say slightly. I would say in hugely different ways. People have a different, depending on how heavy-handed they are, or what style book they're using, or just how they hear things. Uh, I think some people, our brains are just so different. When some people read, they actually hear it. They hear it like music. Other people read it. They're not hearing it. And so some people are tuned into to just different things, different pleasures in reading. And so their impulses to make it smoother for the reader means really making it smoother for themselves. And professional editors, I think, learn to suppress that a little bit and to take a broader view. But it is it is true that there's no one right way for a book to end up. There are many good ways for a book to be in its final form.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and I love to hear that. Um, as the subversive copy editor, I was very used to seeing you sharing more of the finer, like Chicago manual style points, finer points of grammar and style. And then as a writer, editor, or helper with your newsletter, if you've gotten to share your journey as a writer and into self-publishing. So what's been the response to that, and how's it been sharing a different side of the publishing journey?
I I'm really having fun writing that newsletter because it takes a lot. It's a long newsletter and it's crammed with stuff, and so now it's down to like once a month, and it takes so much work that I keep waiting longer and longer between newsletters. I'm going to try to keep it once a month, but yeah, it gets in the way of my writing work. But on the other hand, it forces me to step back from the writing work and remind myself of a lot of things that since I'm not employed anymore in publishing, it keeps me researching things online. I'm reading Jane Friedman's Hot Sheet and her Electric Speed, and I'm reading other newsletters from writers and people in self-publishing. And so being responsible for conveying my experience and information to aspiring self-publishers or writers, that's how the newsletter that's why it's good for me to do it. And the response has been, um, I wish that I would hear more from readers. I get a good open rate. The statistics are good, but even though I ask people to send me questions and send me comments, I don't get very many. On the blog, I used to get a lot. And I think it's because copy editors are really opinionated, but writers, um, are just less sure of themselves. They're not challenging me very much or following up on things. So I don't know. The numbers keep growing. The newsletter is expanding daily. I get new readers. I do think that my preference would be for all of my newsletter recipients to be creative writers interested in self-publishing, but I have a feeling that about half of them at least are still copy editors hoping for copy editing advice, and they're not going to find it. You won't find a mention of the Chicago Manual in that newsletter. Maybe one occasionally, but it's not my focus at all.
Well, when you launched the newsletter, I saw you announce it somewhere on social media, and I knew that I was not going to not subscribe to your newsletter. So I was very happy to get it. And I think maybe it's that with newsletters, with the blog, there's maybe the comment section underneath, but it feels a little closer. A newsletter often feels like more of a one-way kind of encounter. So I think maybe it's more just that people aren't really sure often how to respond or whether they should or whether they're just supposed to receive this. So it makes me I have to respond to something the next time I get a newsletter.
Yeah, well, I love in the next newsletter, which will come out next week, or next week, somebody did ask me a question, so I'm answering their question. It was a good one, and I was grateful to have a topic that I knew at least one reader would be interested in, because I never know for sure when I go. I do rant sometimes, and I'm never quite sure how many readers are interested in that particular topic when I go off on a tangent. But yes, do send any thoughts, and I'll appreciate it.
Well, I think it was in your last newsletter, you had a comment about a pet peeve you had about whenever you would read about eyes flying around the room. And I thought that was very funny. But I think there's also a good bit of writing advice there. So what are your thoughts on that? Why that really gets under your skin?
Oh, I I just I do have standards in writing. Okay, let me say this. Since I started working more with creative writers and not in academic copy editing, I have come to appreciate a much broader range and many more styles of writing than before. What I might have dismissed as hack writing or formulaic before, I I now see that as a valid and valued type of writing by a large audience. That it's easy to be snobbish when you come from the University of Chicago to write off whole genres and say, oh, romance or something like that. But to begin with, romance encompasses everything from the sublime to the ridiculous, and within that, the idea of a formula is a profoundly ancient and satisfying thing for readers. It's why I get obsessed with a TV series, which is, and I don't look down my nose at that it's basically the same formula every week, and that's what I love about it, and that's what keeps me coming back. There will be an arc in something like a series. You hope that there's a development, that a character grows and changes through the course of the series, but a lot of times on our favorite series, that doesn't even happen. It's just the same old shtick every week, and it satisfies something. The predictable satisfies something in a reader, and so I don't have as many opinions about what makes good writing as I used to. I think good is in the mind of the reader. But I do think that even within the formulas, there are standards that make for a satisfying execution of the formula. So I'm not throwing all standards out. It's just that my views of them have been shifting quite a lot. I'm much more tolerant of all kinds of things. And of course, in fiction writing or any kind of creative writing, um, all grammars are up for grabs because you have characters with different grammars. Usually usually narration, unless it's a first person narration tends to be sort of standard taught English, and that hasn't been left behind in any wholesale way that I've seen. But the characters' speech is and characters' thoughts and first person narration is all over the map. So that's fine too. And there you can promote standards of consistency, which is very important to make a believable character. So that's another element that even if you're writing to a formula, those characters to be real for the reader to have a satisfying experience, the character has to be consistently believable as a real person. Um, there was a question somewhere in there that I've lost track of by now.
No, I think that was great because you got to, you brought up a lot of really insightful points, and I think it's really important to think that often the key is innovating within a structure, and that's where you hear phrases like surprising but inevitable. And I'm a big fan of horror. I edit a lot of horror and romance, and those two genres particularly get dismissed. And people think that it's very easy to write something like a romance, and I always say, well, try it. It's not easy, and it's not easy to do it well. And like anything you're gonna like middle grade or anything else, it's there's a lot of mastery of your craft. So I'm really glad to have heard your thoughts on all of that. So I think at this point, it would be wonderful for you to give us an introduction to Maddie's Ghost.
Okay, well, Maddie's Ghost does not have a ghost. And that has gotten me into trouble in a couple of ways. I might have maybe thought more about that title. But at any rate, Maddie's Ghost is about a young girl whose great-grandmother was hanged for murder in the 1930s. And and Lainey is the main character. They're both named Madeline. In the 30s, Madeline's short name is Maddie. In the contemporary story, Madeline is Lainey. So Lainey gets herself in trouble with a television interview about her great-grandmother, and to protect her elderly uncles and grandfather from the pain of that memory of their mother being executed, she determines to prove that her great-grandmother was innocent, or at least unjustly convicted. And so it's a mystery. She sets out to solve the mystery, and there are several things that I wanted to do with this novel. I wanted to make a really real mystery with clues, with things that there were no coincidences, and where the main character had to figure everything out for herself from the evidence that she collects. I also wanted to create a family. I wanted it to be multi-generational. Of course, the great-grandmother is already dead, but her children are Maddie's elderly relatives, and she lives with them. And I wanted to show each one of those old men as an individual, that not just a bunch of old men. I wanted them to be individual characters and to be not stereotypical old people. I wanted them to be lovable, even the one who isn't very lovable. And to show that family dynamic as a complex dynamic, not all sweetness and light, but with frustrations, but love. I wanted to show the love in that family. And I also wanted to have a middle grade novel with no bullies or mean girls. So even Lainey's nemesis, Violet, the perfect girl who has everything, is a really nice person.
Well, I think we're going to open that up in Fictionary now. So thank you, Lucy. We have Lucy Cook here with us, who is very well known in the Fictionary community. And I wanted to say before we really look at this that I love the dedication too, because it's to great grandmothers no hyphen and great grandmothers hyphen. So that's a very copy editor kind of thing there too. And I really love that. Um, but this is your first scene in Fictionary. So Fictionary is a developmental editing program that lets you edit your drafts scene by scene across 38 different story elements for character, plot, and setting. It lets you grade things like your entry hooks and conflict, and if you've incorporated setting, and if you have clear POV goals, and all of the things that you want to look at scene by scene, but would have a very difficult time otherwise keeping in your head at once. And as you'll, another thing with Fictionary is that as you fill out and grade, in a sense, your scene for all of these different elements, you can look at these beautiful visuals for your character arc and the story map and all of these ways to get at a better draft of your story and a more effective and a more pacier version of your story. So one thing I always ask at this stage is what you are trying to accomplish with your first scene, because first scenes are so important.
Yeah, with this first scene, I wanted to introduce the main characters, the family, each one as an individual. I wanted to show that the father is distracted, not really there for Lainey. And then I wanted to distinguish the three old guys, who she calls the unks, collectively. And I wanted to present the problem. And in the midst of all of this explanation or whatever, I wanted there to be some compelling force that would grab the reader right away. So that's why I opened with the telephone call the reporter asking for the interview, because I thought that most people, not just middle graders, most people would be immediately interested in that as something that they would think, I want to, either it would be a scary thing or it would be an attractive thing. It would be an emotional thing to have the possibility of going on TV and all your friends seeing you, and it would be on the internet later. That's a big deal for someone. And so whether she should do it or not, and then the hint of her wanting to do it, but the family probably not wanting her to do it, sets up a conflict that will propel us into the rest of the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's a really nicely executed scene. And in any first scene, the reader's always asking right from the first sentence, why do I care, and what's going to happen next? And you answer those questions and very nicely, and I think it is an intriguing scene that makes people want to read more. And I love, and I think middle grade, any kind of mystery is so attractive at all ages, but especially middle grade too. And one thing I wanted to say is that in Fictionary, you can grade your entry hook and your exit hook, and I think your exit hook here I would call a humor hook, because it's such a nice moment when you talked about the distracted dad, and essentially all of these things are kind of floating around in Lainey's thoughts and with her unks, and at the end, the dad kind of looks around and is like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, he wasn't even listening.
No, it's a very funny moment.
I have to say, I didn't end the chapter there originally, and one of my friends who beta read just slashed through the last paragraph that I had. She said, "I think it ends better there." So I can't even take credit for that. I knew immediately that she was right.
Yeah, and that's a great shout out for beta readers. And there's always that advice of get into the scene as late as as you possibly can, and get out of it as early as you possibly can. And that's a good illustration of that. Um, I also wanted to ask you about, I think, especially in middle grade, the idea of the friend is always very important. And in this case, Lainey has, I think she's introduced in a later scene, but Lainey has the friend L, and sometimes friends are an ally. Sometimes they serve as often, especially in middle grade, you see like the friend might serve as comic relief, but how did you feel about the friend here and the role of her friend in this book?
Elle is just a loyal friend. She'll go to the mat for Lainey, but she also looks out for her. She's worried about her. Lainey asks her to keep a secret. Lainey's having these weird experiences, these sort of visions or visitations from some kind of presence, and Elle wants her to see a counselor or tell her dad, and Lainey says, no, I won't. I'll stop telling you. If I have to go to someone else, I can't tell my dad or he'll lose his job, all of this kind of thing. And so Elle says, well, okay, I'll give you 2 weeks. So she's really adult. She's also very smart. She's kind of Lainey's alter ego in a way, because Lainey's more charge ahead, seat of the pants, and Elle keeps her on track and is just the person she texts, the person she phones. She even lies awake in one scene and thinks, gosh, I'm just so lucky to have a friend like Elle.
Well, and that's an important thing to remember, that you got at, is that with all of your non-protagonist characters, you always have to think about how they fit and match and challenge the protagonist. So you said that really well. And this flew by, and we are at the end of our half hour. So we can check in and see if anyone has any questions for Carol. And also want to let everyone know that there are, as always, lots and lots of writer events and training sessions and other events in the Fictionary community. So look out for those and sign up for those and take advantage of all these wonderful things.